like this is like between two ferns.
Yeah. Make this as natural as possible in front of 100
Yeah,
people.
exactly. Let's have a chat, Will,
Yes.
shall we?
I mean, I guess we should probably start by talking about what product engineering is, or what our understanding is, which I can go and you can chip in if you disagree. But in my mind, when people talk about product engineering or product-minded engineering, as some people refer to it, it's about being, as distinct to a software engineer, it's more than a ticket muncher, is the sort of short answer. But the more in-depth answer is, software or technical people who really care about the why behind what they're building, try and understand the product they're working on, and also have some level of agency around their work. They're not just fed really well-defined specs. It's like they have some input on that kind of priority, and that I think is the essence of product engineering.
Yeah. I mean, we've been speaking a lot today already about this sort of like the increase and the rise of like agentic development. And I think we've sort of skipped this, this what has been growing, this concept of product engineering. And that's like mostly for people that they already have engineering teams, right?
Yeah.
And they used to be agile engineering teams.
Yeah.
Everyone's favorite implementation of agile is like, we're an agile engineering team. Are you? We just drag tickets off of a backlog. How is it different? What's changed?
Yeah, I think the idea predates particularly a lot of the last few years of AI hype. There were lots of organizations, like a big famous one, Post-Hog, only hire product engineers, and if you ever go on there, so they build like analytics products and other things, and if you go on their customer support forum, quite often you'll get replies from engineers in the team who then go and action and make sure your problem is resolved. So in some ways not that much has changed, but in other ways it has, because I think the awareness of how much that value that can add and the impact has grown. So now it's not confined to a small subset of organizations. Everyone's kind of thinking about how the roles blur and how to actually kind of have more autonomy and get more done in a more efficient way, and not like treat software like a factory, I think.
You mentioned roles there. Like what roles is or are product engineers replacing?
I think good question. I think in smaller teams, I see more teams where maybe you don't have dedicated product managers per team potentially, but I don't think it's quite as simple as they replace a role. I think a bit like we sort of alluded to earlier, and Heldon just talked about, that there are just sort of shapes of tasks, jobs to be done within certain contexts, and in some smaller environments maybe they do replace roles because you can get more done with fewer people, but in other cases maybe just the boundaries between the roles are a bit blurrier and there's much more kind of cross-functional collaboration.
Yeah, let's poke at that a bit actually. So for example, I think the common one is like product managers, because you share a word. How does that change? So your product manager versus your product engineer?
I think some product managers had fallen into the trap of being Jira story writers and viewing that as product management. And I think it's really laid bare that that's not really what it is. It is a lot more about setting a vision, a direction, research, and understanding that future path. So again, I think it's really like emphasized some important behaviors and trends that were already there, but just amplified them a lot more.
Got it. Okay, so if we're imagining then we've got a small team, a couple of software engineers, product manager, and in this product engineering world, you're saying that the lines are just a bit blurred. We're saying that the product manager might be prototyping?
Yeah, exactly. And they blurred the other way too.
Yeah.
So like at the last Weave, we had I think a director of products from Carnival talking about prototyping with Lovable and how that helped advance conversations about what they really wanted to build and the sort of strategy. So I think they are blurring both ways in that sense, and it's much more cross-functional.
Got it. Okay. You said prototype there. So the product managers are using Lovable, prototyping. Maybe the product engineering teams, but the actual devs are prototyping as well. Are we saying that in this sort of more modern world where we've got agents popping up, are we stopping at the prototype?
No, I think maybe a bit less so now, but definitely a year and a half ago, there was a sort of prevailing thought that AI tools are great for prototyping, but not for production. And I think there you have to make the distinction between experts using AI and non-experts using AI, and that's where, like, the classic example of the founder who built a product and bragged about it on X and was like, great, I didn't need a team, I managed to do this all myself, and then got hacked a day later because he'd published API keys in the web page or whatever. You know, that was an example of maybe someone who didn't have the understanding of what could go wrong and the expertise, so they probably should have stopped at the prototype. But there are lots of other examples where, you know, and I don't just say engineers as well can use AI to build products in production. You know, like technical people. I've worked with lots of product managers and designers who are really technical and do actually kind of understand a bit more, you know, not completely naive to the risks, who can then go and apply that in production. So it's not just about stopping at the prototype. Maybe to give you a chance to answer some questions as well. I think one thing I wanted to ask you about is at Vorboss, you kind of lent, you know, lots of organizations were sort of lent more towards the buy versus build, say 4 or 5 years ago, and Vorboss was a bit different in that respect. You a lot more build, even pre-AI. So talk us through the kind of the drivers for that.
Yeah, so I mean, people thought I was a lunatic in this early days. Before we had these sort of like agentic development, and we obviously had low-code tools. But the general gist of engineers in the room and in the world was that, like, don't go build software where you don't go reinvent the wheel. Don't go build software for easily solved problems. Go buy those. So like, go buy your CRM. Go buy you know, warehouse management systems and things that could be quite complicated. And my view on this was always that when you're buying software, it tends to fall into 2 buckets. It's either so opinionated that it sort of dictates your business processes, or it's so generic that you have to configure it to meet your business processes. And usually when you're buying it off the shelf, it's very rare that you're actually using in-house resource to configure someone else's software. You tend to go, well, I'm buying, so let's offload the development and the configuration of that as well. And then you use a consultancy, or you use a professional services arm of the software that you're buying from. And then suddenly all of your business processes that you've defined, all of that knowledge, all of that domain knowledge, that really important stuff that is going to dictate how you execute the processes, now lives outside of your business. And if you want to make a change to one of your business processes, as we often do, suddenly you're having to either spend money or block on time, block on, you know, backlog of another business. So when I started the engineering team at Vorboss back in 2021, I thought, how can we find a middle ground in this? And for me at the time, it was low-code tools. So actually our founder and ex-CEO was already using Airtable, so already using some low-code tools in the business to just go solve some problems. And usually these tools get used in place of software engineering functions, but I decided to use them as part of the software engineering function. And don't get me wrong, it took a long time to convince devs to use Airtable, especially back in 2021, 2022, when you know, we were a lot less open to not pushing commits. Today, we're sort of, as devs, we're sort of a little bit more open to it, but back then it was, I'm not writing code in some like web-based IDE that has no SDLC, software development lifecycle tooling for anyone not technical in the room, like with your continuous integration, your continuous deployment. I really pushed on it. It wasn't all roses, but it certainly allowed us to produce technical implementations to solve business processes really quickly.
Yeah, it's interesting when you think about that sort of low-code, no-code, and actually the photos of Brett and Tim in their bedroom in those early days of Loomery. I know they were building lots of stuff with those kind of low-code, no-code platforms. And when you think about what your interactions with them, it's a lot of like orchestration and thinking about how to knit them together in a way that people now talk about how you use AI, and you're taking a step back, thinking about the design and how to wire stuff together. So do you see a role also for low-code, no-code in the future, or like, is it redundant?
No, actually, I think it's more important than ever. I think actually the way software engineering is going, and this isn't exactly a hot take, is that devs won't need to know, long-term, won't need to know the ins and outs of a particular language. Like what we used to focus on and pride ourselves on was knowing how a particular language framework or multiple languages and frameworks work inside and out. And that's what made you a senior engineer. That's what made you like someone that's been woken up at 3 a.m. and knows the mistakes and knows how to fix those. I think that's going to go away, because actually, to a significantly more degree than we have at the moment, because actually the quick recall, the knowing what a language looks like, something else can do. We're only doing that at the moment because there isn't a better alternative. When that goes away, I sort of imagine a world where actually software engineers, or whatever that role becomes, they just understand how data flows between systems. They understand how tools connect, and they understand how to get something from A to B and where the pitfalls lie in those tools. And what would be a great way of doing that, if you don't need to care about the actual code that comes out, is like draw it visually. It is a low-code tool. It is a no-code tool. You're drawing like product A and connects a line to product B. That's data flow. And that's how I see it going eventually.
And do you think if you were starting Vorboss today, you would make any different decisions, whether it's the buy versus build or the shapes of the engineering roles that you brought in?
Yeah, I think some of the mistakes that I made when using low-code tools were the first 3 hires that I put into the team were people that went through a General Assembly career change course. And they were like super hungry people that know how to work in or knew how to work in a business, but they didn't necessarily understand, the ins and outs of being woken up at 3 a.m. because you pushed a dumb commit. And so what does that do? That builds tech debt. And so I think what I would do if I was starting again today, and it's easier today, hindsight's 2020, but also the world has changed massively in the last couple of years. I don't know if anyone noticed. I think I would probably have more senior engineers earlier that are open to using low code and agentic tooling. And it's so easy to sit up here and say that now, right? Because everyone's open to it now. But in 2021, no chance.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. How does that work with Loomery though? So whereas I've built this sort of engineering team in this almost sort of enterprise company. We're building critical national infrastructure, and we have to get all the certifications. We're powering hospitals and banks. That is sort of enterprise CTO level. What does it look like more like startup CTO?
In what sense? How do you mean?
In the sense of this sort of like using agentic development, using like low and no code tools into your product engineering function in a CTO role of like a Loomery shaped org.
Yeah, well, so it's interesting that maybe there's a line with some of the stuff that Christian presented earlier, and that we've talked about different stages of usage and trying to progress all our teams and our clients through those stages. So like the first stage really is using that kind of AI as a co-pilot, as a chat. So, a lot of people doing individual tinkering, sometimes in quite shadow places with their own Claude subscriptions or whatever as a secret. So for us, it's like trying to progress people through to more like collective learning, thinking about workflows and how stuff knits together and how you all use the same tools in a way, and AI is weaved into your day-to-day, because that tends to be what has much more impact, more value, and also you can put your kind of right guardrails around that as well, and you're not leaking data in certain places.
Nice. Okay. We've been given the wrap up, so we very much speed ran this.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah. Let's close with one question then. And I actually know that Will was planning on asking me this, but I'm sneaking in. What are the 1 or 2 things that you would say to anyone that is looking at possibly using product engineering, or possibly a non-technical person that wants to use agentic development? How do they start?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I do think those stages I just talked about, think about it in those stages and how you can bring people together and stop them rather than them just tinkering in isolation, and make it a kind of a collective team thing. On the more product engineering side, I think maybe I'll finish with a bit of a story of early in my career. I actually started out working in an investment bank just a stone's throw from here over there, and I worked in a sort of what was a clearing and settlement department. And so it's a lot of what happens after you make a trade to make sure that everyone understands what the trade is and the funds get moved in the right way. And I was in one department. I was never allowed to speak to the teams that worked on trade booking or the traders, and I was never allowed to speak to the regulators. It was always like, here's a spec. This is the format of the trade messages. This is the format that the regulator wants to see, and this is the format that Swift or whatever expects. And it was really tough. And a lot of our challenges weren't technical challenges. It was like, have we built the right thing, and have we understood the domain correctly and the way things map correctly? And I remember at one point when I actually moved on from that place, one of the director of the department said to me, are you sure you don't want to be a BA, Will? Because I asked so many questions about that, and like even early on in my career, I felt like our biggest problem wasn't how to code this, it was this other stuff around it. And I think my advice to people is try not to pigeonhole people in that way and encourage that kind of curiosity and inquisitiveness, because I think that is what makes that kind of product engineering really work.
Nice. All right. I think that's all
Cheers.
the time we have. Thanks. Cheers.